If I could describe the top two popular disciplines in combat sports, that would be MMA and professional boxing, is that MMA is a sport of redemption and boxing is the sport of perfection. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, in boxing, it's no secret. Everybody tries to keep up the undefeated record until it's time to, let's say, feed you to the wolves or a big money matchup. Whereas with mixed martial arts, even if you were to take a loss and even if you were to take an L within your journey, somehow or some way, you can still become a legend, a big-time headliner, and not only that, in the case of Pereira, a double champion, or a 2 world division champion, now possibly in 2 disciplines within the top 3 disciplines of kickboxing, MMA, and boxing. And you look at Prochazka, it's really not that different. The guy has taken losses before. He got knocked out by Muhammad Lawal in Rizin when he fought out in Japan. Muhammad Lawal is one of those MMA legends that has never really made it to the UFC because of, let's say, the lucrative contracts he may have gotten in other organizations around the world, such as Japanese leagues like Rizin or Dream that they had back in the days, or Pride FC. Although I'm not sure Muhammad Lawal was within that time frame or era, but for sure Rampage Jackson was, Dan Henderson, so on and so forth. I could make an entire podcast episode of the Pride FC days in Japan in the mid-2000s, which, by the way, is what Jiri has embodied with being a veteran of Rizin. The guy has fought in organizations where he had to fight multiple times in one night, which is the stuff that are made of legends and things that is really known in the Japanese mixed martial arts market. And then you have Alex Pereira, who is coming off of a loss from Israel Adesanya, but comes back and beats the guy that defeated Israel Adesanya, now finally getting a shot at the lineal light heavyweight champion of the world before John Jones had to go out and basically relinquish the belt because of the fact that, well, he wanted to move up to heavyweight. He hasn't fought in a while. And now they're fighting all in the same card as John Jones and Stipe Miocic, which is going to be in Madison Square Garden on November 11, 2023, this coming few months. And how do I see this fight going? I can honestly see Alex Pereira winning, to be quite honest with you. And let me tell you why. Because for one, Alex Pereira has the type of style that is very technical, very methodical, but at the same time, it's not one of those situations where even if he was losing rounds due to getting outpointed, he still has that nuclear bomb that could finish you. Unlike Israel Adesanya, who, by the way, really relies a lot on his technical abilities, and sometimes to the detriment of him being so hesitant, in the same similar fashion that you saw with Jermell Charlo when he took on Canelo this past weekend. That's what you're witnessing in that current moment of time, is a guy that is a little bit hesitant because guess what? He's dealing with a guy that has a little bit of strength and knockout power and a little bit of cardio, so he's going to be very hesitant on engaging. I can see Jiri Prochazka not hesitating and to his own detriment getting caught with a hook because he left his chin out wide open with his unorthodox style that sometimes works to his favor and at times works against him. So I don't see this going any other way for Alex Pereira other than a knockout, especially if he keeps his game plan intact. Now, what about the wrestling aspect of this entire fight? I honestly think that Alex Pereira probably has a better wrestling pedigree than Jiri, and we've seen that multiple times. We've seen him get taken down. We've seen him comfortable off of his back and not wanting to get up. And guess what? That's going to be a problem with somebody like Alex Pereira, who trains with the former light heavyweight champion of the world, the guy who has fought Jiri. none other than Glover Teixeira. So I think all favors stack up to El-Kheer winning that one. So now that we got the kicks and punches out of the way in that particular segment, because that is my official prediction, in every direction, El-Kheer is going to win. What method? I'm probably going to make a prediction of that somewhere down the line as the fight gets closer. But right now, what I'm telling you is that El-Kheer is the much more well-rounded fighter. He's a better striker. He has better wrestling. He can take Jiri down. Jiri doesn't show any evidence in his past fights, at least, of takedown defense. And we can only speculate if he's going to try to improve that in this upcoming training camp. But the one thing that I can say is that El-Kheer is going to get him in the clinches. El-Kheer is going to get him on the feet, especially with the way that he's very sloppy and can keep his hands down. And on top of that, if El-Kheer is disciplined, there isn't anywhere this fight goes that doesn't favor him. So now off to the kicks and punches from that and on to the glorious aspect of MMA, because that's really what this is. You have two guys that don't have this undefeated streak like Jon Jones or Khabib, and we all love those, especially the boxers and in the boxing world. They love them. You can only imagine why they're saying that Errol Spence needs to retire after taking one ass whooping of his entire career from a prime and really all-time great Terence Crawford, as time is going to tell in the later future. And yet we don't want to give him credit, as if like we didn't see Errol Spence dismantle Ugas, as if we didn't see him dismantle Mikey Garcia. Now granted, it kind of shows you the level of competition that Terence Crawford has faced because of the past competition that Errol Spence has had. A lot of these guys have fallen off. So you got to think, this guy was built off of the boxing system in terms of building your guy up and then giving him to a top name later down the road for a big marquee matchup that's going to make everybody rich, which is what Dana White sort of hints at in the term of a going out of business sale with every boxing event. That's not what you have with MMA. What you have with MMA are guys that have lost really big, guys that have lost multiple times, but guys that have also came back from the adversity and becoming champion, such as who? Daniel Cormier is one example of that. He didn't become just a double champion, okay? He was also coming off of a loss from Jon Jones, which realistically is the only true loss that Daniel Cormier ever had in his career, that and Stipe Miocic. That's the only Achilles heel that Daniel Cormier has experienced. Other than that, he's beaten the likes of everybody that you could think of in the top heavyweight division. There isn't a name that you would not bet on with DC. Derek Lewis, easy work. Josh Barnett, easy work. We're talking about all-time prime in their careers, right? So that includes Antonio Silva in his prime, easy work. Everybody, easy work. Pat Cummings, yeah, it was an easy work, but great storyline because they said that the guy beat him up in practice and then they brought him in as he was a barista working in Starbucks. Oh wait, I still have a show to do. Nonetheless, this is the greatness of MMA, is that you have a redemption and then having the biggest prizes at the end of it. Conor McGregor was in that same boat. He loses to Nate Diaz, which was a big disgrace in his first ever UFC loss because he was supposed to win that one. Nate Diaz was coming off of drinking Coronas in Mexico, then gets called in to fight Conor McGregor and knocks him down and then chokes him out. Only for Conor McGregor to, guess what? Come back, win a decision against Nate Diaz in one of the biggest fights of the summer of 2016. And then in the same era, in the same time frame that Trump gets elected into office in 2016, Conor McGregor becomes double champion. And that is a great redemption story. And then prior to that, Conor McGregor was choked out by Joe Duffy, who, by the way, isn't in the UFC anymore. Some Ukrainian 125er who was 155 when he fought Conor, or 145 when he fought Conor, and then dropped down to 125 because he was so small, and then didn't even make it into the UFC, nor any other big regional promotions in the area, not even European level. Conor gets choked out by that, and then he's double champ. That's the beauty of mixed martial arts, any way you want to cut it, is the simple fact that it is a sport of redemption, and unlike boxing, it is not the sport of perfection. But at the same time, that is sort of what we love about boxing, right? Is that it displays perfection, not only within its science of hit and not getting hit, but also the aspect of their promotion and their importance of making a guy stay undefeated as long as they can, and then drawing as much money as they can within that particular time frame until they have to give them up to the big wolves or take that big risk and that test in order to jump up to the next level. That's sort of one of the most beautiful things about boxing. But with MMA, yes, there are perfections that have happened in MMA, but it shows you that the perfection that you get out of MMA, you're not going to get the same type of quantity that you would get in boxing. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about Khabib, Mr. 29-0. And then I'm talking about John Jones right now, who is probably on the verge of retirement after his next fight with Stipe Miocic and may never come back and fight again, maybe 1 or 2 fights after that. But nonetheless, John, more than likely, with the way that the favors are stacked on his favor, okay, I think he's going to retire undefeated in that same matter. And these guys are rare. So how many matches did Khabib retire with? 29-0, okay? Now, you look at Floyd Mayweather and Joe Calzaghe, you're talking about 49-0 and 46-0. Or 50-0, rather, with Mayweather, not to disrespect him, sorry. Rocky Marciano was 49-0. Floyd was 50-0, plus you could count all the other exhibitions he's had, so now that's probably up to the 60s, doesn't matter, here and there. Joe Calzaghe, 46. These are huge numbers in comparison to 29-0, or maybe even 30-0, 31-0 if Khabib decided to keep going with a couple more matches. Now, why is that? Because with MMA, it's very hard to maintain perfection for a very long time. And that goes with your career. That also goes with how the fight is going as the fight is presently being competed in that current moment of time. It's very hard to stay disciplined, to stay focused, and to be perfect every single round, stuffing every single takedown. Very hard to do, to have a 100% rate of never being taken down. Never getting knocked down. That's a very difficult thing to obtain. Never getting hit. A very difficult thing to obtain. A lot of these things are a very difficult thing to obtain. That is why MMA is not the sport of perfection. It is the sport of redemption. Boxing is a sport of perfection. Everybody loves perfection in boxing. You look at everybody that is involved in boxing, this is what they strive for. And I'm talking about the top names, because once you take an L, just like Derek Chisora, when he took an L in the beginning of his career, it just went downhill from there. Not downhill, but he became the guy that took on the biggest fights, no matter who they were, and win or lose, he came out and showed out and gave the best account of himself every time, which made him marketable to his own degree. But that was very rare in boxing. Gabe Rosario is another example of that. However, very rare in boxing. Very rare. So you'd have to be these names like Gotti and Ward, and let's say even the fictional version of Rocky Balboa. Because if you look at the record of Rocky Balboa, he was almost like a 50-50 fighter where he had a lot of losses. He's had a lot of wins, But it's just one of those things where, you know what, this is not a record of a champion. And by the way, you guys can look it up. They actually do have an actual boxing record of Rocky Balboa. And it's somewhere within the 60 fight range where he has like 40 wins, 20 some odd losses, or something crazy like that, which is crazy that they would even come up with a record like that. But if you want me to answer why it is so much easier to maintain perfection in boxing as opposed to MMA, it's because of the way that the sport is designed. Once again, a sport that is designed to, you know, hit and not get hit. I mean, there's only one thing that you can do, okay? Which is what? Hit and not get hit. And most of the guys that are the most athletic, guys that have practiced the most in this particular sport are always going to win. So it's a combination of experience and athleticism, and in somewhere in that, mixing those two elements to make an unstoppable force that you see with the likes of Canelo, with Floyd Mayweather, and everyone else. But nonetheless, even with Usyk, there's always a weakness point in every single one of these boxers. The only difference is that in past history with the likes of Tyson Fury and Floyd Mayweather, they knew how to pick out their opponents at the right time and at the right place. You can even say that with Khabib. I'm going to tell you guys something, and this might be controversial, but it shouldn't be. And the reality is that the way that Khabib built his career is very similar to how you would build a career of a top upcoming prospect boxer. Meaning you give him very easy fights in the beginning, you work his way up, you get them used to feeling how to win. Because oftentimes, a lot of people always like to say that, yeah, the best way to learn in the gym is to constantly get your butt whooped. And I wonder if that really is a case to take a look at and say, you know what, this is probably what's going to help you become a better fighter. Or what becomes and helps you a better fighter is knowing and feeling how to win every time. Knowing how to put on a rear naked choke. Because guess what? If you're constantly out there wrestling with Brock Lesnar, you're never going to get a choke on him if you're a 125-pound fighter, are you? That's just the reality of it. So what exactly are you learning from Brock Lesnar as a 125 fighter getting thrown around and not being able to do anything to him? Rather, you as a 125er, hypothetically speaking, or whatever size you are, goes out and spars with somebody that's the same size as you, maybe somebody with a little bit less skill than you, and then getting the feel of how it is to choke somebody, how to take them down, how to properly pull off a double leg with very little resistance from your opponent, because you're always going to be, let's say, in a position where you're stronger than them. But oftentimes, a lot of people like to go to the gyms where they're going to spar with a grade A professional boxer and get their head rung in and thinking that's going to help them learn. Rather, there's the other approach that says, go with guys that are less skilled than you, try to see your skill level in terms of what you can execute, what you can pull off, and then go in there and challenge yourself the more that you get comfortable with the person that you are sparring with the person that you are competing with. So this way you can catapult yourself and compete at the next highest level. This is where boxing has it correct when it comes to perfection versus redemption. But at the same time, when it comes to perfection and redemption, those two things can't go without the other. Because you cannot have perfection without having to give yourself a time of redemption and knowing what it is that you're weak at, and how to work on those weaknesses and how to strengthen them, and also trying to understand what it takes to compete at the next highest level. But nonetheless, this is the reason why I think Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka is going to be a great matchup. Because you don't know. You don't know how much they've improved in one area to another. I told you earlier in this particular content, in this particular segment, that perhaps maybe Jiri is going to get taken down multiple times. That's what the past says. That's what the statistics say. That's what all the experts and the pundits of the mixed martial arts community is going to say, because that's what they observe. But at the same time, a lot of you guys are not in the gyms with Jiri Prochazka. And if you are, please write in the comments below and tell me if Jiri Prochazka is out there working on his wrestling takedown defense. Because a part of me feels like he's thinking to himself that this guy, Pereira, isn't going to try to do anything else other than just try to strike with him. And maybe perhaps Jiri has a point to make in a very arrogant way that wants to show like, hey, you know what? I'm probably a better striker than this guy. Okay, come and pull my punk card and see otherwise. But that is why they call it the theater of the unknown, because you never know what they're going to do in these matchups and what they're going to do in these fights. So guys, like and subscribe. Let me know if you guys like the content. Write on the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, because I think that one of the privileges that we have as mixed martial arts fans, and also if you're a boxing fan, is that you get to see the two sides of the fight promotions in terms of how they constantly emphasize perfection and greatness in boxing that goes along with their ethos of a long-awaited historical content of videotapes and content of big fights that they've had since the beginning of time, which is probably in the late 1800s, right? And then you have mixed martial arts, which is a very new and, how do I say this, a baby sport in comparison to the mainstream sports. Well, now they have to put the best to fight the best, because otherwise, how are you going to compete with these organizations such as the NFL, where every week they are constantly taking on the best teams against the best teams? Where you have Premier League soccer, they are literally doing the same thing. They are constantly in a position of fighting the best guys versus the best guys. And then on a weekly basis, one guy wins and one guy loses. There's always a couple of upsets from a smaller team versus a bigger team. And it's the same way that you see in mixed martial arts, which makes it exciting. It makes it fresh. But with that, you have to create a story of redemption from those losses, as opposed to boxing, where the story that they want to tell is the story of 100% perfection. Don't forget to like and subscribe.